Today, we're spilling the tea on 4 horrible client mistakes.
I am so excited about this show because you and I have been doing this for a long time. And one of the privileges of what we get to do in our day job is help people make sound and solid financial decisions. But in the vein of making really good, sound financial decisions, we do come across some big mistakes. And oftentimes, they're things we can help our clients with, and sometimes they're behavioral things that maybe we can't even help them with. But if we can let you, the audience, know about them, maybe we could share some insight that'll be valuable so that you don't fall into these same mistakes.
Yeah, these are common mistakes that I think you see out there in the world, financial world. And what I love about today is we get to share the story, the background, but then tell you how to make sure you don't fall in these traps and how to even come out on the other side better.
Mm-hmm. Now, these are all real people. So this is not like hypothetical stuff we're talking about. These are actual people that Brian and I have interacted with. So we thought it'd be helpful to kind of give you a little bit of the context, the background, who the person was, not specifically, but kind of generally who they were, what their issue was, and then we want to walk you through, okay, how could you do it better? How can you navigate this better so that you don't fall prey to
Names
the
have been
same thing?
changed. Some of the details have obviously been changed. We respect the privacy of all of our clients, but it is important. Let's first talk about Client A.
Names have been changed.
Spent with reckless abandon. I mean, this one, and by the way, this is totally legit.
Yep.
And the fact that, look, I think one of a lot of people, if you ask us what our job is, a lot of people think it's that we say no to everything. And we do. We try to risk assess, we stress test, but no matter, with some clients, it doesn't matter how much we tell them, no, you're doing things wrong or you're in trouble. At the end of the day, it's still ultimately their money.
Now, what's really interesting about this specific client is the way that she came in this money was a big windfall, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't something where she had necessarily built and saved and accumulated a nest egg. There was an event that took place and she came into a large sum of money. And it was the first time she had ever had access to this type of money and the first time in her life where she had to manage it and navigate it on her own.
Yeah, so this was one of those things where we were, my biggest goal when this person came on was to educate them on how money works, kind of like what we do with the Money Guy show. But the problem, I've realized there are a lot of people that are straight up just consumers. There's a reason why our society, and she did. She spent with reckless abandon, and we wanted to create an illustration to kind of show you what this looks like and what we're dealing with when clients don't listen and why you should be nervous when you transition from builder of wealth to consumer of wealth, because there is a risk that you need to work through.
Now, I think I want to share some compassion here, right? So when she came into this windfall, it should have been enough money to last her for her retirement and the rest of her life. It was plenty. It was a large enough sum that it should have been able to do that. But as it came in, it wasn't like she went out and bought the fancy houses and the fancy cars and the things that you think people end up losing their mind on. It was the small purchases. It was the helping family members. It was the redoing bedroom sets. It was the refurnishing the house. It was the one more thing. There
were a few big things like beach condos.
I guess the condo, that's true.
There was buying fancy cars for relatives. There were some things. I mean, it had some MTV Cribs-esque feelings to it that felt over the top and back to reckless abandon. So, but we wanted to create a case study to show you how this could play out. And we had 2 different scenarios here. We had what we consider a healthy withdrawal rate, a client with $2 million, 60-40 portfolio. And we figured they both retired at 2,000. Can you tell you normally do this part? Because you're so much better at this. I've somehow got out over the skis. I'll let you take over on the assumptions.
So we have a tale of 2 retirees here. We have Ryan and we have Deborah, and we're both assuming they start their retirement with $2 million, and they're both invested in the exact same portfolio, 60-40. So not super aggressive, not super conservative, sort of a balanced portfolio. And they're both going to retire in the year 2000, and they are going to live off of these dollars. Now, we don't assume there's any other sources of income, no pensions, no social security, just living off of the portfolio. Now, what Ryan is going to do is Ryan's going to say, hey, I want to have a very sustainable long-term withdrawal rate. So I'm just going to start pulling out $80,000 a year out of my portfolio. So that is a 4% withdrawal rate based on the starting value of the portfolio. He says, you know what? I'm going to set my lifestyle at $80,000. That's where I'm going to live. Deborah, however, has started listening to some financial folks out there, and she has heard, hey, 4% is too conservative. I can live off of an 8% withdrawal rate. It's going to be okay if I pull out 8% of my starting portfolio value. So I'm going to set my lifestyle at $160,000 per year, double that of Ryan.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting on this is that we did this consistently. So we gave them the benefit of the doubt in the fact that this doesn't have the adult children pulling the money off. This doesn't have the vacation property and the other big gifts that you're giving to those adult children. But it does show you do need to be nervous as you're starting to set up your consumption of your portfolio.
Because watch what happens over this 23-year retirement period. After over 20 years, Ryan actually has more money than he started with. So he was living off of this $80,000 a year, and yet the portfolio continued to grow. And then if he had maintained that withdrawal rate, that dollar figure income, his portfolio now would be worth over $3 million. When you contrast that to Deborah, who was living off of a $160,000 a year lifestyle, she actually ran out of money in 2016. Same exact investments, same exact timeline. The only thing that changed is how much money they were pulling out of their portfolio. When you get to financial independence, when you get to the stage in life where you're no longer working with your brain, your hands, and your back, and it's on you to count on your army of dollar bills to provide for you, how much you pull out year over year and what your ultimate withdrawal rate is matters a ton.
And what I like, what this visual doesn't show is what the initial investment, remember that $2 million we start. And what I like is the long term. We've been working with clients. For me, I have clients that have been with me since the early 2000s, like 2002. And what I find amazing on some of those clients is their actual initial investment has actually gone below zero, meaning that they actually spent every bit of their principal. But Ryan's walk here, where the money is actually worth more than he put in, is very normal. I mean, because that's what a healthy, safe withdrawal rate can do for you, is that you can spend your entire principal down, but if your money and your army of dollars are working and building upon themselves, it can sustain you even through retirement.
So let's talk about how you can do it better. How can you not fall into this trap? The very first thing you can do is have purposeful retirement dollars. A lot of folks, when they retire or when they come into a windfall and all of a sudden they have access to this money, maybe it's $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, it feels like it'll never run out. But you have to be a financial mutant that realizes some of those dollars don't just need to pay for what I need tomorrow or next month or next year. Some of those dollars need to pay for what I need 30 and 40 years down in the future. So you have to make sure that the dollars you have in retirement are purposeful and you understand what they are there for and what they are not there for.
Well, I think it's interesting when you talk to a prospect, you ask them, "Hey, how much do you spend per year? How much do you think you'll spend in retirement?" And when they don't have an answer, that's a concern, because you do need to at some point have a very good list of what your expenses are, and you need to even understand the difference between needs versus wants, because you have to plan ahead and have purposeful retirement dollars, because if you just let life happen in retirement when you're no longer working and you can't just work another year to get a little extra money, it's different, and it can make you feel like everything's shrinking in around you.
And one thing that can help you kind of hone in on that purpose, okay, how much do I need? What is the amount? We actually have a tool you can go check out. It's a course called our Know Your Number course. You can go to learn.moneyguy.com. And the whole point of this is for you to figure out, okay, what is the purpose of my retirement? I want to live at this standard of living. I want to have this much income coming in. So if that's the case, this is the number that I need to hit. If you've not worked through that exercise and you are approaching retirement or you want to be approaching retirement, I would encourage you to go check it out, because that begins to allow you to actually assign purpose to those dollars so that you know what the future looks like, so you don't fall into a trap like Deborah fell into and ultimately run out of money.
Yeah, and that leads to the next point, which is stress test your financial plan. Now, look, this is one of those things where I'm fortunate. This is the exception, not the general way that it is with client relationships. Most of our clients are financial mutants. They get it like you guys. But there are some that even if you show them, look, we're going to do Monte Carlo simulations, we're going to show you, that way you can correct course after year 1, year 2, year 3, and quit spending, quit wasting it on the superfluous stuff. But that didn't work for this client. That's why I'm telling you, you have to create a plan, and you need to listen to what the plan is telling you, so every one of those dollars can be purposeful.
And then this last one seems counterintuitive. It doesn't sound very money guy-esque, but we think when it comes to retirement, you ought to be scared, in quotations, with a healthy fear when you consume. The first time that you retire, the first time that you step away from the workforce, you ought to be a little bit nervous when it comes to spending. You ought to have a little bit of tinge, not to where it frightens you into inaction, and not to where you can't sleep at night and you're losing sleep and those sorts of things. But you ought to recognize that, man, when I decide to consume these dollars, it's a big decision. And so those first few years of retirement, you have to check yourself to not lose your mind, to not go out and do the beach condo and the cars and the this and the that, if you've not already planned for those purchases and you're not already stress tested to make sure that your plan can handle that. So I think, my opinion is, a little bit of healthy fear going into retirement can be extremely valuable.
Definitely. Bo, that's probably a great segue to talk about client B. Now this one, I mean, look at the headline here. This is why life sometimes is better than even fiction, because don't buy your financial products from the insurance agent that's hanging out at the Chick-fil-A. This is the scenario on this person. This has a happy ending to a degree, because we were able to fix this. Is that had this client that it was another windfall client, meaning these are clients just like in client A, client B came into a large sum of money from an inheritance. A person had passed away. They were coming into a large sum of money, and they didn't know who to talk to initially. So they had a morning routine where they were going to a local Chick-fil-A type restaurant. This Chick-fil-A, every morning while they were there ordering their Chick-fil-A, there was this nice gentleman that was also at the Chick-fil-A every morning, just hanging out, and he'd start up a conversation. And I remember her saying he was so nice. Well, this individual convinced her, he found out she had a windfall, convinced her to buy 2 very large, talking about just under 7 figures, just under $1 million worth of equity indexed annuities. Yep. And these things sounded great to her, because realize she's an older, she comes into this money not having a lot of background in personal finance. And the first thing that he highlighted was you can't lose money.
Afford
so
to
that
lose any
sounds
money.
good if you're somebody who's coming into a large sum of money, you don't know how money works, so you're like, man, what could go wrong? Bo, why don't you describe what is actually in the brochure on some of these insurance-based products?
Yeah, so she was a little uneducated in the financial realm, so she had a bit of fear that I think the salesman was able to play into, because this is essentially what he told her. He said, all right, I've got a solution for you. You have this big windfall. You want it to grow, but you don't want to lose it. So I have this thing, this solution, this idea where you make money when the market goes up. So you can invest these dollars. You can actually have them working for you into the future. But when the market goes down, you don't lose any money. Well, for someone who doesn't know these products, for someone who's unfamiliar, that sounds like a win-win. That sounds like an absolute best case scenario, best of all world solution. However, what the reality is and what the brochure said aren't exactly the same thing, because there were some things that the salesman did not tell her. If he did tell her, it was buried in fine print in the disclosure on the paperwork she signed.
Well, and I think that's what, because look, everybody knows, because I have to make sure I give the disclaimer, these products are designed, there's probably a small select group of people at work, but I can tell you for certainty that the suitability for this client did not pass the test, because the first thing that they did, yes, it's true that you could not lose money unless you pulled the money out faster than you're allowed to. Now, here's a big problem for this person. This person had debt.
Yep.
They had some debt they wanted to pay off. Well, the insurance agent did not share that, hey, you're not going to have access, because there's actually a 15-year surrender period on these products that we're putting in that lock you up. That's how we can give you guaranteed performance, is because we're going to control your behavior for the first 10 to 15 years. He didn't disclose or have a full conversation, because she had things she was planning to pay off immediately with this money.
But she did communicate to him, hey, there are some bills that I've got to pay. I need this in order to provide for my lifestyle. I need this to end up paying my bills. So he did note to her that, hey, distributions are allowed. You can actually pull money out of this. Now, He did not mention the 15-year surrender period. And he did not mention also that the withdrawals that she was actually able to pull out are limited no more than 10% of what the annuity's value was. So what that means is if she did have a desire to go pay off her mortgage or to satisfy some large debt or to take some big distribution, that would actually have been a disallowed distribution that would have triggered the surrender that would have been incredibly costly. So her behavior was somewhat controlled over the first 15 years of this policy, even above and beyond what she would have wanted to do with those dollars.
This next one kind of cracks me up because I still have the echo of he's such a nice man. Well, here's part of the rest of the story is that this thing had a monster commission on it. This person was going to make well over $60,000 to $70,000 of the first year commission. Well, I found out, she came to me, explain somebody, because she just had this gut feeling that something wasn't right. And somebody in the community had recommended, hey, come talk to Brian. And once I talked to her and found out, hey, she had some debts to pay down, I was like, oh boy, this policy is not, this doesn't pass the suitability test. Well, good news, a lot of these insurance products actually have what's called an unwrap period where you can actually reach out to the home office. If it's within a certain number of days, you can unwind these policies like they didn't exist. And corporate office was more than accommodating once I explained that, hey, this person has an immediate need for some of these proceeds, and other things. They were very easy to help us unwind, but I'm the one that had to take the phone calls from this insurance agent, and he all of a sudden was not a very nice man. Because you can imagine when this all went down, if you had somebody, he was already spending that $60,000 to $70,000 commission. I'm sure he was jumping backflips to spend that money, and when it now gets pulled away because he got a hold of the client got a hold of a financial advisor who walked through the actual needs of the client. It changed his demeanor on everything.
The other thing, now this did not come into play because we were actually able to unwind it, but the other thing that you should know about these types of annuity products is that there are high fees and high operating expenses. So not only is there this large commission on the front end and these lockup periods that control your behavior, but they're pretty expensive. Some fixed annuities can have fees and expenses as low as like 0.3%. But variable annuities, it's not uncommon to see them with annual operating expenses of like 2 to 3% per year. So they become very, very costly over the long term. So the question you might be asked, okay, well, this guy seemed trustworthy. I'm sure he was a financial advisor or financial professional. What are some things that I could do to protect myself? How do I make sure that I don't fall into the same same trap that this client almost fell into?
Well, the first thing is kind of know what you're buying.
Yep.
I mean, if the financial product seems more complicated than you can understand, be careful, because I feel like there's so many products that are sold through fear as well as complexity. And the financial world does not have to be so overwhelming that you need to have your head spun into buying some complex product that has all this fine print, all these restrictions, and you end up not knowing up from down.
Now, this isn't perfect, but we tell folks, hey, when we explain something to you, to our clients, when we have a financial strategy that we're recommending, if you couldn't go to the local grocery store and explain the strategy to the person standing behind you in line, we probably have not done a good enough job of educating you on what that strategy is, why it makes sense. So know what you're buying, know what you're doing with your dollars, understand why that specific product or that specific strategy makes sense for your situation. And if you can't get your head wrapped around it, start back at the beginning, go through it again. Start back at the beginning, go through it again. Start back at the beginning, go through it again. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure you know where your dollars are going and you know what your dollars are doing. And in addition to that, you want to make sure you understand who the person you're working with is. If someone is giving you guidance or giving you advice or selling you a product, you should immediately ask yourself the question, okay, who is this person? Why should I trust them? Where does their validity come from? And should they even in fact be someone I'm taking advice from?
Well, this case specifically, it didn't even pass the suitability standard, but I'll take it a step further is that we are fiduciaries.
Yep.
And that's one of the things where, and if you don't know what the term fiduciary means, it means you have to put your client's interests ahead of your interest as the advisor. And that's an important thing, I think. And that's not something, because there are different standards in the financial space. And if you had to go with making sure even the suitability as well as the much higher fiduciary standard, they would have gone in and looked at when does this client actually need the money, because that's an important part of this that just did not work out. And we wanted to come up with a solution, because I hate just poking holes without actually giving somebody actionable advice. So if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, completely free, we have the 8 questions to ask anybody who's trying to sell you a financial product. And I think you'll be better served. You'll be on a better, much more stable ground, and you won't get ripped off or potentially ripped off like this client was.
And then the last thing that you can do to protect yourself, and you guys are already doing this, is just kind of have a general understanding of how the financial world works. I mean, you are listening to or watching a financial podcast, so you're already educating yourself, but just let those spidey senses go up. If something sounds too good to be true, then perhaps it is. There is no such thing as a free lunch out there in the financial world. So understand what you're getting in. Once you get it, what you're getting yourself into, and make sure that you continue to educate yourself to protect yourself from folks who maybe are selling something that don't have your best interest at heart.
Yep. We got client C. Now look, I fought the content team, but I'm only the boss in name only, because I was overruled on this. As we say client C, but this is actually was not a client. This was an experience share from, we had a landlord, great landlord. It was a father-son duo that we really enjoed renting from them. Good people, really great people.
One of the first office spaces you ever rented, right?
Yeah, and they treated me so good. I mean, it's just like when I moved here to Franklin, first office space I rented before we bought the building we're in now. We still love that landlord because he was so good to us. Well, back in Georgia, this landlord was so good to us, especially when the business was not in this super stable place. This family was really good, but they ran up the score. They got rich, but they kept running up the score. And here's what happened is that the father in this scenario had actually created several successful businesses. He was an entrepreneur and had built some wealth where he was fully financially independent. It did not have to work, but he did have an adult child, a son that he was that they had gone into business doing land development and levered it all up. And the building we were actually in was 100% paid for, no debt on it whatsoever. However, it was put up as collateral on some of these developments. And the rest of the story played out in the Great Recession is that they lost it. It literally, we were in the building when the bank took over. The bank was our landlord, which was kind of an interesting thing for a period of time. But I look back on this as a situation where I was so sad because in all indications, this person had won the game.
They were already home.
But they made some key mistakes that led them down a bad path.
And so the question is, okay, well, how do I, if I'm a financial mutant out there and I'm building towards financial independence, or maybe I've done that, maybe I'm at financial independence, what are some of the things that I can do to protect myself? And here's the very first thing. Understand the difference in risk tolerance and risk capacity. Risk tolerance is how much risk am I comfortable with? Like, when do I start losing sleep at night? And it's not uncommon for someone who's an entrepreneur, who starts businesses, who does real estate, who gets into that kind of thing. Your tolerance may be through the roof. But if you've built up a nest egg that it doesn't make sense for you to lose, or maybe you've reached the age where you don't have enough time to recoup it, your capacity for risk, how much risk you should take on, may no longer match your risk tolerance. And in our opinion, for a sound financial plan to work, those two need to be taken into account, and those two need to be aligned. I think this is one of those things where the son had convinced the father, hey, this is going to be just fine. The tolerance was okay, but the capacity for risk certainly should not have been there. And ultimately, because they weren't deep enough, they ended up losing the building.
Yeah, do not overlook that second thing. I know most financial advisors, they do measure risk tolerance, but that would not have stopped this. This person was already had a risk tolerance by being an entrepreneur that was much higher. They needed somebody to protect them from just what could they come out on the other side with. And that led to the next point that we wanted to make is don't let adult children put you in the poorhouse. Now, look, there's nothing wrong with starting a business because they realized their land development was actually tremendously successful before it collapsed. It's just that they're back to the risk capacity versus risk tolerance. Never, ever, ever should have put some of those key assets up as collateral. Maybe you go ahead and put a cord off a portion that is at risk because that's the necessary thing with land development, but you don't put the whole pot on the line because that was the problem. And we see this, I got to tell you, it's one of those things, we all love our children tremendously, but if you're not careful, you do need to be careful of adult children pulling you down through the economic outpatient care, taking on too much risk. Be healthy with the way you have that financial relationship with your adult children. And I think a lot of that can start, for those of you who are watching with younger children, is make sure that you're also instilling some of those core financial mutant tenets into your kids. Financial order of operations doesn't have to be just something you keep to yourself. Share it with family members and loved ones as well.
If somebody wanted to share that, do we have something we could show them, Brian? If somebody wanted to share.
Moneyguy.com/resources, and then, hang on, I'm going to watch it, because this thing tried to cut me. It jumped out and tried to kill me last week, so I've got to be careful. But the financial order of operations can truthfully, it's universal to help anyone, so you don't have these issues.
And then here's, again, this is a repeat. You've heard this before, but we're going to say it again. How to do it better, have purposeful retirement dollars. One of the things that if we could go back in time, and if this landlord would have been a client of ours, this is one of the things we would have counseled them on. We would have said, hey, if you're going to take risk, if you're going to be aggressive, don't do it with, as one of our friends I say, don't do it with your eating money. Don't do it with the money that you need to put food on the table. And unfortunately, these people just took too much risk. They levered everything. They should have, like you said, portioned off some of it that's going to be your financial independence piece. Hey, I know that no matter what happens, I have this pot of dollars over here that's going to protect me and provide for me in the long term. So if I want to go be aggressive, if I want to go be speculative, I'm going to do that with the vacation money, not with the eating money. If you can figure that out, even in financial independence, you're more likely to set yourself up for success and not get out over your skis.
Well, yeah, having that management team and also with being purposeful is going to protect you from blind spots because, you want to take on more risk. And that's a great segue into Client D. And I love the way this headline is written, is because this is probably a lot of folks that are out there watching. We live in a very political world these days. Fortunately for you guys, the Money Guy Show, we don't get into that stuff. We try to stay above it. But Client D reached out to us because they let CNN and or Fox News help manage their portfolio. And I bet a lot of people, you have relatives or you resemble this in your own way. And here's what happened with this client, is that in 2016, that was kind of a presidential election. We got a call right after the election results, and they're like, whoo, I was watching the news, and this President Trump is coming on board. This is some scary, scary stuff. I want to go to cash. And they, now I will say, we convinced them to not take everything to cash. I think we get some credit.
Sure.
And they'll even tell us we get some of the credit that we convinced them no. But we had to cord off a chunk of their money in cash because they were just so sure that this was going to destroy the economy.
And what I think is so interesting is if you think back to that election specifically, and I think probably even elections other than that one, on both sides, there's always this idea, because we filled both of those phone calls. Hey, if this person wins, this is going to happen. And then if this person wins, then this is going to happen. And they are adamant that they have it figured out. They know what the future holds. But unfortunately, I don't think that the future is quite that clear. And unfortunately, we have 2020 for this client. Now that we've lived through that we made it through that, we saw what the markets did. It turned out very differently than the client had anticipated it turning out. So going to cash was not the prudent financial decision to make at that time.
Yeah, markets made a decent amount of money right after that election, and the client, they even admit that it was a learning opportunity for them. But we want to create an illustration so you can also turn this into a learning opportunity. And if you are a person that's pulled by the politics and the cable news networks, because remember, they don't care about your wallet. The cable news networks always are trying to create shock and awe fear campaigns because they need your eyeballs, they need your ears, because that's what sells advertising. We want to create a kind of a slide that showed, hey, this is all the presidents all the way back to the 70s. Yep. What did they do while they were in office, both from a total performance as well as an annualized performance? And you can see the good news is it's like all things. The market and the economy wants to grow and expand, so the stock market is the beneficiary of that. So most presidents All but one on this list, by the way. Poor W. Yeah, I always make the joke, and everybody hates this joke. Oh, he's like, oh no, he's going to do it.
I want you to know Reby has her head down.
W is the only president that actually put his initial on the stock market. If you look at it, you can see he had a negative performance, but he did get to put a W with the stock market volatility performance. You see it? I wanted to get Daniel to outline it, but he wouldn't do it.
Yep.
He listened to you. Like I said, I'm only the boss in name only around here, but it is interesting that the majority of the time, markets make money.
Yeah, I think if you're going to guess, okay, red, I'm going to do this, blue, I'm going to do this, it certainly seems like the market does not care as much. It's certainly not over the long term, and you can see that here. So what are some things that you can do, or how can you position yourself to do it better? The very first one, Brian, this is one of your favorites.
Oh, yeah. Always be buying.
Always be buying. Automate the wealth building process, because if you are in the accumulation phase, if you are someone who's building towards financial independence and the market goes up, great, the dollars you have working are making more. If the market goes down, great, the dollars you're putting in work are getting in at lower and lower levels. So if you can create the environment where you are always buying, always adding the pot, always putting money in, it seems highly likely, based on historical results, that your future self will thank you for that. Don't try to outsmart it. Don't try to get too cute with it. Always be buying, set it and forget it. You'll be amazed at how easy building wealth can be.
The whole thing about investing is there's going to be uncertainty. Realize there's always going to be a risk-reward type thing where the uncertainty's out there. So if you can just create an automated system that creates inevitable wealth by just every month, automatically you are buying, it takes all those stress and pressure points out of it. So while you're young enough and you have years and decades from retirement, this should be a no-brainer. Make it happen. And that will also protect you from number 2, which is know your blind spots.
Yeah, this is a big one. If you're someone and it's a political season or there's geopolitical stuff going on and you find that you're glued to your news channel of choice or you're glued to your social media of choice and you consume so much of the information that begins impacting the way that you go about making your financial decisions, I would argue, are you actually acting on actionable, sound advice, or are you allowing your emotions to take control? And if you are allowing your emotions to take control, perhaps you need to recognize that as a blind spot. Man, if I'm glued to this social media and I see this person say this, it's going to affect me this way. Be aware of that. Be cognizant of the fact that you are impacted and affected by that, and know, okay, what's actionable and what is just noise that maybe should not influence me to take action.
And that leads to, because you said it actually in your statement about don't be an emotional investor.
That's right.
So we say avoid being an emotional investor. That's one of the things that I think is when you can tell you're maturing with your money and your skill set, is because it becomes a superpower, is that like I said, blind spots, emotional stuff that causes you to have those sleepless nights. If you can create a system that gets you through that and stay away from the noise and those other things that they don't care about your wallet. They don't care about your success. You just need to kind of create the processes that make you feel like, and it's the analytics, it's the systems, it's the processes that'll get you through the emotional stuff that has you just want to react and have that impulse. That's not going to be healthy.
Here's what I think is so interesting about all these case studies that we shared. These people are unique. They're different ages. They're different success levels. Some were entrepreneurs. They're different genders. They are diverse. And yet, we are all susceptible to falling into financial traps, falling into financial pitfalls if we don't stand on guard. We don't do the things that we know we're supposed to do to put protections in place. And that's what we're here for. We want to help be that guide that helps you make sound financial decisions. Because unfortunately, it seems like more and more the world around you does not care about how well your balance sheet looks. It does not care about how well your net worth statement looks, but we do. And so we're going to keep pouring information in so that you don't become one of these case studies in the future.
Well, I always think wisdom can be something you actually gain from experience, or wisdom can be taught to you. So what I like is that we actually try to give you the best of both worlds. We give you these experience shares so you can actually see the wisdom and the knowledge that was obtained from seeing other people's mistakes, but you actually get to learn from that. And then instead of falling into those traps, you actually get to build your toolbox and your skill set the financial mutant, if you will, so that you don't have to just create those mistakes that so many of your peers, so many of the people you see that are around you at all times. We want to help you be above and better than that. And that's part of being part of the Money Guy Show. Mm-hmm. And if you are not going to themoneyguy.com, go check out our free resources at moneyguy.com/resources. And then if you find that even with the knowledge, you're your own worst enemy, please graduate to the next level. Take this to the next level of learn, apply, grow. That is the abundance cycle fulfilled. We work with clients all across the country. Thanks so much. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Money Guy Team.